A deafening roar cut through the pre-dawn silence over Tehran. Explosions cracked across the skyline. Sirens wailed. Black smoke rose from the heart of Iran's capital. Within minutes on February 28, 2026, this was no longer a distant threat, it was a full-blown military offensive unfolding in real time. The United States and Israel launched coordinated airstrikes across Iran in an operation described by Washington as major combat operations, aimed at crippling Iran's military capabilities and leadership. President Donald Trump appeared on social media hours later, declaring the campaign massive and ongoing, and warning that the offensive would not stop until perceived threats from Iran were eliminated. In key Iranian cities, Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, Karaj, Kermanshah, shockwaves rippled through streets and neighborhoods as explosions struck military installations, missile sites and reportedly the compound of Iran's supreme leader. Sirens sounded not only in Iran but also in Israel, where a state of emergency was declared. Schools closed, airspace was shut, and citizens braced for retaliation. Within hours, Iran responded with missile and drone strikes targeting U.S. bases and Israeli positions across the region, signaling that this confrontation could explode into a wider war. Was this the beginning of a new Middle East war? And is this the first time a U.S. president has openly launched such a sweeping offensive without clear international backing? The world was watching, and the consequences were already spreading far beyond the battlefield. Tensions between Iran, Israel, and the United States have simmered for decades, largely centered on Iran's nuclear and missile programs and its support for regional allies in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. In June 2025, Iranian missiles struck Israeli territory in response to Israeli air attacks, marking a severe escalation that lasted 12 days before an uneasy ceasefire. That conflict set a precedent for military confrontation between Tehran and its rivals. In early 2026, the U.S. dramatically increased its military presence in the Middle East, deploying aircraft carriers, fighter jets, and missile defense assets, the largest buildup since the 2003 Iraq War. 2. Operation Epic Fury. What happened? On February 28, 2026, Israel initiated a preemptive strike in coordination with the United States, which also launched strikes from air and sea under a campaign labeled Operation Epic Fury. The strikes targeted Iran's air defenses, missile infrastructure, IRGC command facilities, strategic military leadership compounds, sites linked to Tehran's nuclear and ballistic programs. Israeli officials claimed that Iran's supreme leader may have been killed in the initial barrage, though Iranian authorities dispute that. 3. Trump's message and strategic goals. President Trump framed the offensive as necessary to remove imminent threats to the United States and its allies, asserting that the campaign aimed not just to degrade Iran's arsenal but ultimately to encourage the Iranian people to topple their own government. We are going to destroy their missiles, annihilate their navy, and ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon, Trump announced in a widely distributed statement. Critics pointed out that this represented a major policy shift, as Trump had previously positioned himself against new wars, raising questions about domestic and international support for the operation. 4. Iran's response and regional escalation. Iran's response was swift and forceful. Missile and drone attacks struck U.S. positions and allied states throughout the region, including Gulf countries and neighboring battlegrounds. Casualties and infrastructure damage were reported. Neighboring states reacted with alarm. Airspace closures, emergency alerts, and military mobilizations spread across the Middle East as nations braced for broader conflict. 5. International reaction and diplomatic pressure. World leaders reacted unevenly. Some Western allies expressed concern about the legality and long-term consequences of the strikes, calling for de-escalation and immediate ceasefire talks. The United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session to address the crisis. Meanwhile, powers like Russia and China condemned the strikes, warning that renewed warfare could destabilize the region further and disrupt global energy markets. 6. Domestic political debate in the U.S. Back home, Trump's decision stirred political clashes. Some lawmakers supported decisive action against Tehran, while others criticized the attack as unauthorized and lacking congressional approval, a potential violation of constitutional war powers. Public opinion was divided, with debates centering on whether the strikes would protect U.S. interests or entangle the nation in another protracted Middle East conflict. 7. The big question: is this a new war? What sets this operation apart is the scale, coordination, and stated objectives. By actively targeting Iran's leadership and calling for regime change, The US and Israel moved beyond isolated strikes and entered a broader campaign with geopolitical ambition. Whether the world is witnessing the start of a new Middle East war depends on what comes next: continued aerial campaigns, ground incursions, diplomatic breakdowns, or negotiated settlements. The first day of Operation Epic Fury reshaped the geopolitical landscape of 2026. Overnight, centuries-old regional balances shifted. Clouds of war spread from Tehran to capitals around the world. The ramifications are still unfolding. Global oil markets tremble. Regional alliances are tested. Civilian populations fear escalation. Diplomatic channels scramble to contain flames. Has Donald Trump launched a new war in the Middle East? The answer now rests with how Iran responds, how regional powers react, and whether diplomacy or continued conflict defines the coming weeks. One thing is certain: the world has entered a new chapter of volatility, where decisions made in mid-February could echo for decades.